Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. In this week's episode, Racism, the Ugly Truth, we will be taking a look into the lives of two individuals who will help us understand what it was like being an African American living in a predominantly white community.
But what exactly is that reality? Growing up in Idaho has definitely had its challenges for many of us Native Idahoans, especially for those of us here in the Treasure Valley area, where in the past decade alone, the population count has almost doubled. With an increase in population comes an increase in everything from housing prices to economic development. It also means there is an increase in diversity. But why are people moving here in the first place? Some people say it's because of the cost of living, while others tout the quality of life here. Let's be honest, in Idaho, you truly get to experience it all. You were able to enjoy all 4 seasons, possibly even in the same day. You have the luxury of going to downtown Boise to get a feel of city life, or being able to go on a scenic hiking adventure at Table Rock. It's the best of both worlds here, wouldn't you say?
Unfortunately, for many minorities who have lived here for a great portion of their lives, their reality isn't the one that I just described. Their reality of growing up in Idaho as a member of the small percentage of minorities was not one filled with beautiful sunsets and city lights. It was filled with the harsh reality of racism and discrimination. Our first look into what life was like for an African American man living in Idaho is from the perspective of a member of our community who actively strives to make a difference each and every day. That man is Charles Taylor. Charles is the current president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP here in the Treasure Valley area. Charles is retired military and actively works to bridge the gap between our cultures within our community. When speaking with him, I was able to ask him what it was like living in Idaho as an African American for the majority of his life. Here's what he had to say.
I originally got here in Idaho in 1970. There was an incident where at that time, in order to go into some of the bars downtown Mountain Home, you were required to have the Idaho ID card. Now, even though you was in the military and you had a military ID card, that was not sufficient, and that only applied to African American individuals. That there was a difference between Idaho back in that early stage than we have now. Racism now is kind of being cast over as not so much as a racial issue, but the same type of system repackaging that was an effort to keep people of color from voting. There was a strong effort to get that done. Now, it's the same thing, but they go by it in a different way. And now, they put up all of these barriers. The barriers being is, well, if you don't have a driving license, you can't register to vote. Do things like changing polling places or voting places. And they do that based upon what area of the district that mainly people of color it resides in. They'll change them, and they'll change them sometimes without even letting anyone know, until you show up at a place that you've been going to for 10 years to vote, and all of a sudden you go to that same place. And now you'll get there, and then there's a sign that say, well, the place has been changed. Okay for a person that has all the time in the world to vote, but if you're working, there needs to be a system set up to where you can vote over a period of time. It's just one thing after another.
Charles and many other African Americans didn't have the same freedoms as many of Idaho's citizens were accustomed to. He wasn't given the same opportunities as many of his neighbors were. He had to fight to be treated as an equal. Others, like Charles, shared similar experiences of the harsh realities that came with being Black and living in Idaho. One man realized early in life that the color of his skin would be a challenge to overcome for the rest of his life. That man is my father, Dennis Patterson.
first time I really remember the impact and what it meant to be black in a white community was when I got into junior high school. And that's the age at which a lot of the boys that I knew were becoming priests, which is a position in the Mormon church. And when they reached that position, in large measure, they quit hanging out and having friends that aren't Mormon. And at that time, the Mormon church's teaching was that a black person could not be a priest. The teaching was that the black skin was a curse that precluded blacks from being in the priesthood. And hence for me, it changed my life in a way that I couldn't have anticipated. I now knew that it was the color of my skin that kept me from having certain friends and kept me from being a part of that church if I wanted to. Not to say that I wanted to, but the idea that I couldn't simply because of my skin color. It affected me in a way that's actually hard to describe as a young boy to have that realization.
Dennis Patterson was born and raised in southeastern Idaho. When speaking with him, he spoke as if these memories were ones that happened just yesterday. Many of these experiences are ones that he will carry with him for the rest of his life. The teachings of the LDS Church made it difficult for Dennis to feel accepted in the community. When asked how these exclusions affected him as a child, he responded with feelings of melancholy.
For that, exclusion was in this community. The YMCA and the Boy Scouts were largely controlled and influenced by the Mormon Church. So those are two of the activities that most boys growing up in Idaho at large participated in. And I never felt comfortable being in those organizations. If I went into the Boy Scouts, I couldn't be an Eagle Scout because to be an Eagle Scout, you had to be a priest. It was a clear racial barrier put upon me as a boy that hurt. It was painful. And I lived with that throughout the rest of my years in junior high school and high school.
That policy didn't change until 1978 when Dennis was well into his college years. Although growing up in Idaho as an African American had its challenges, Dennis never let that discourage him from living his life to the fullest. He was the first native-born Idaho Falls African American to graduate from college. He graduated from Idaho State University in 1978 with a bachelor's degree in business. He started out his professional career as an administrator at the Idaho National Laboratory in 1980. After progressively moving up through management, he landed a position as the ethics officer in late 1994. As the ethics officer, he was responsible for advising senior management and promoting ethical behavior and investigating allegations of misconduct.
It's like it happened yesterday. It was such an overwhelming sense of pride to be the person that would represent one of the largest employers in the state, to promote ethical conduct, to help ensure fairness, to make a difference both for the company but also for the employees. It was just an amazing time in my life where I felt like I had really been blessed and I really had a purpose in life.
Dennis had truly found a place within his community where he could make a profound impact. He worked in that position for the next 13 years as a valued member of the INL, until one day he was approached by an employee in need of his help.
In early 2005, an employee by the name of Lauren called me on the phone. It was called the hotline, where people could report allegations of misconduct. And what he told me was that he had just been fired from his job and that they refused to tell him why. So he wanted to find out why. At the same time, he assured me he had done nothing wrong. With that, I agreed to review his complaint and get back with him and explain to him why he was terminated. In my mind, this would be at most a 2-day exercise. We would find out why. We would tell him. I would continue on doing my job. But what I expected to be a 2-day exercise turned out to dramatically change my life over the next 4 years and even up until today. This person who called me was African American. This person was simply wanting to know why, and he told me that they said they wouldn't tell him. So I made a couple of calls over the next couple of days, and what I got was managers telling me that no, they didn't tell him why, they weren't going to tell me why, that we were right to work state, and the matter was closed. But for me, that wasn't good enough. Number one, these individuals had a responsibility, not only to Lauren, but also to myself as the ethics officer, to cooperate with my investigation and to be truthful. That didn't happen. After several weeks, I was able to convene a group of managers and legal so that I could share with them the information that I had gathered about Lauren. The information I gathered is that he had no legal problems with the law for the past 7 or 8 years. He had no work environment issues over that 7 or 8 year period. And hence, I believe that we had made a mistake, we should acknowledge it, and reinstate his employment. After that hearing that I participated in, the company made a decision that no, we're not going to rescind. And in fact, I later learned from a follow-on discussion that someone had said that Lauren had 5 violations of the law that he had not disclosed on his employment paperwork. My question to that person was, what were those 5 things? And again, I was told, we don't have to tell you. So I went down to the courthouse and I discovered that he did not have any problems with the law, except for fishing with 2 fishing poles and, I believe, running a stoplight. At this point, my boss, who was a direct report to the president, said, the case is over. You don't need to do any more work. I told him, no, the case is not over yet, because it appears that management has lied and they violated our ethical standards.
Over the next 3 months, Dennis was finally able to get the INL to do the right thing, which was to rehire this African American man. At this point, Dennis assumed the fight was over and justice had prevailed.
Unfortunately, over these same 3 months, I now became the bad guy. I became the African American subject of unfair treatment. Over the next year and a half, I was investigated 4 times. I was accused of misconduct on 4 different occasions. I actually was unfairly disciplined at one point during that process, where they took away the office to my keys, walked me out the door, and said, you don't get to come back to work for 5 days. I became the victim of not only retaliation, but in my opinion, also discrimination.
During the lengthy process that Dennis went through to vindicate himself, he was again approached by another employee who was in need of his help. This employee wanted to make a report of misconduct by the INL and wanted to remain confidential, a simple request that any employee should have the right to.
Unfortunately, these same individuals that had been conducting this ongoing harassment of myself told me that I had to tell them the name of this confidential employee. I refused to do that because it was wrong according to our ethical standards, and it was wrong according to my own moral compass. I refused to do that knowing that I could have been terminated. As it turned out, I wasn't terminated, but they removed me from my position as ethics officer, transferred me over to an engineering organization for which I had no qualifications or experience. And for 2 years, I had to spend my time reviewing procedures and conducting meetings.
Fortunately, Dennis was a government employee, which meant there was a whistleblower process in which he could file a complaint. The wheels of justice were slow, and it took 4 years until he was able to vindicate himself. The INL was ordered to take corrective actions.
There were times when I didn't know if I was going to make it, but I made it. And I knew that the company knew how difficult they were making it. I believe it was conscious choices on their part to try to break me, try to make it go away. But it didn't happen. My wife supported me. My children supported me. I had my faith, and I persevered. In spite of all the challenges and difficulties, I remain hopeful. I believe that I can continue to make a difference. I believe in the goodness of other people, and I believe as a country we're going to continue moving forward. And I want to be a part of that.
Eventually, in 2013, the INL planned to lay off 100 members of their staff. My dad knew that this was their opportunity to finally get rid of him. Unfortunately, his prediction came to fruition one fateful March morning.
I cleaned out my desk. I prepared a goodbye email note to all my friends and colleagues. When I walked in that morning, in fact, before I left home that morning, I told my wife, this is the day. I got to work. I got the call. I went up to my boss's office. He had a piece of paper in front of him, and he started reading the script. And before he got through the script, I said, Juan, I knew. I said, nope, this is it. I get up and walk out of his office, down the stairs, and came home. That was my final day at the INL.
After being laid off, my father took the next year to recount his experiences with discrimination at the INL.
At that point, I decided to write a book. I wanted this book to not only describe in detail factually what happened during that 4 or 5 year period, but I also wanted it to be an instrument by which the INL could improve, and an opportunity for employees at the laboratory to work in a better place. And that's why I wrote the book. It's been a year writing the book. I published it in 2014. The book is in the Idaho Historical Society, all of the local secondary schools, and the public library. It has been a very rewarding experience, something that I feel very proud for doing. I believe in some small way I've made a difference for somebody.
In his book, Whistleblower, Justice Over Discrimination and Ethics Violations, Dennis describes in further detail his experience. He is currently working on a revision that focuses on the racial discriminations of his story and hopes to continue educating others about the realities that many minorities face across the nation. Dennis not only fought for justice within the workplace, he wanted to make a difference in his community. He and 10 others came together in 2006 to do just that. They formed a nonprofit organization known as the African American Alliance. Each year, the Alliance hosts a Martin Luther King banquet that aims to honor Dr. King and to promote diversity and improve cultural awareness. Dennis was the first president of the organization and is still actively involved to this day. Fast forward to 2020. We have come a long ways from the times that Charles and Dennis described. My daughter, who is both Black and Hispanic, is able to attend all of the same activities as the other children her age. We're able to ride our bikes throughout our neighborhood and are welcomed by smiles and waves. She is able to live her life as a part of the community. In fact, Boise's mayor, Dave Beater, announced last May that Boise has been certified as a welcoming city by Welcoming America, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that provides guidance and support to help communities become more inclusive towards immigrants and all residents.
A meaningful way to look at society is we are who we are. I was always under the impression that the United States was great because everybody came here from all walks of life.
Although we have seen many positive changes throughout the past 70 years, the fight is not yet over. Racism and discrimination are still alive and well in our community, despite the efforts that have been made to end it. Personally, I have had people refuse to work with me because of the color of my skin. I have been that little girl who cried because she didn't understand why she was being made fun of because her skin color was different than everyone else's. My experiences with racism were in no way comparable to those of my father. But does that mean they don't hold the same value? Does that mean that I deserve to be treated in this manner? Many people with whom I've openly discussed my personal experience with racism respond with a look of confusion. In the Treasure Valley area, the minority population makes up only 9.51%, with the African American population only making up a mere 0.68% of that number. Many members of our community aren't aware of the discrimination that's happening in their schools, places of employment, and local organizations. But why would they? And how could they? Unless members of your close family or friends have experienced discrimination, most people are blissfully unaware that it's still an issue in our community. So how are we supposed to fight a fight that no one is talking about?
I had a long history of meeting with the chief of police. At that time was Chief Bones, or William Bones. We used to meet for over 2 years. We met at least once a month, and for coffee. I met with him. I met with the Meridian. Met with the police chief of Garden City, and a lot of them, and a few of their officers that patrolled in areas that was predominant people of color, you know. Mm-hmm. And we had and I thought, and I still believe that we had a very, very good relationship. And he'd come in and he'd bring issues to the branch at our meeting, at our branch meeting, and we got to have a really good relationship. I thought it was very vital to what we had as far as the crime rates or how people perceive the police chief or the police department, how they dealt with diversity and all these things. You don't get a really sample of that because of the number of African American people in the valley. However, how he was tracking it was based upon the number of stops to make sure that there wasn't profiling. You know, the community was very openly, and they felt that they had a voice or someone to call if they had some concern.
Through partnering with the NAACP, the Boise Police Department was able to create a bond within their community. This partnership ensured that the minority citizens had a voice to be heard. Charles also commented on Boise State's response to racial issues.
So I had a conversation at the time with the president of BSU, Dr. Custer, and we were concerned about some of the concern that the students at the campus was expressing some discomfort, fearful of what was going on. It was back in the time when President Trump had got elected, and there was some of the people of color or sexual orientation was fearful of being walking around on the campus, because everybody that was supporting the Trump would come out with their red hat, with their "Make America Great" hats on and things like this, and they didn't see any place that they could go to in the faculty to talk about their concern. And so what they have a diversity center on campus there. First Tuesday of each month, I believe it is, they would have what they call a Taco Tuesday. It is how I originally got the orders with Dr. Custer, was asking him about that situation, and he was openly willing to discuss what we had, and I asked him. My question was is that there was seen to be a disconnect between the faculty and the students that attend. All the students, there were very few students that was there that were from anywhere else that said that they would like to make Idaho or Boise their place of study. That tells me that maybe you're talking to the wrong people. Maybe you need to talk to someone, a representative from some of those groups that I've talked to after they are here for a year or 2 years, and see that if they're as enthused about being here on campus as they were in their freshman year. I also question the lack of diversity that it seemed to be on the faculty staff. But my main conversation, I asked them, I said, I'll question all of these meetings that I attended to. There was not one person of color there at these Taco Tuesday meetings that were from the athletic teams. I would like to get an audience with the athletic director. I said, because it seems to be we'll not have any problem having a diverse athletic team, but we have a problem with having a diverse academic setting.
In February of this year, Boise State held a program that was aimed towards discussing author Robin DiAngelo's book, What Does It Mean to Be White? Developing White Racial Literacy. Her goal was to discuss white privilege and what it means to be white. The goal of the program was to engage white people in recognizing their privilege. In an article from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, writer Wayne Hoffman spoke on his opinion of such a program. He said that such a campus training validates my belief that Boise State University's retired president, Bob Kustra, had a larger than previously stated role in making BSU a campus that embraces victimhood, identity politics, and old-fashioned stereotypes in all aspects of campus life and academics. Hoffman goes on to say that DiAngelo is an academic who claims all white people, including herself, are inherently racist. Claiming you're not racist makes you a racist, or so she contends. And white people suffer from what she terms white fragility, an unwillingness to admit and talk about their own intolerance. Although her approach is one that I may not necessarily agree with, it does bring up a valid point. What role does ignorance play in racism?
When we had the Black Lives Movement going on, people that was against that said, well, all lives matter. Well, yeah, all lives do matter. Black lives did not, that movement said Black Lives Matter did not indicate that all lives didn't matter. What they was trying to say is that the way people are being killed is that black lives don't matter because the people that are being killed are people of color. We're trying to equate Rosa Parks sitting on a bus to everybody's right to go out and not stay under this stay-at-home deal. How can you equate those two things there? So it's just one thing after another, one hurdle after another.
Did those who compared Rosa Parks to a lady who refused to leave a park have racist intentions, or was it out of ignorance that those comments were made? Ignorance does play a role in how we interact with people from different cultures, but where does that line get drawn? In what manner can some of these cultural gaps be closed? Dr. Andrea Miller, Dr. Chadley Stern, and Professor Helen A. Neville, all educators at the University of Illinois, look into the psychology behind this very question. In their excerpt in the Journal of Social Issues, Introduction to the Special Issue on Race and Racism, they mention that in most white households, conversations of race and racism are frequently silenced as a way to appear non-prejudiced and to avoid discomfort. As they were examining different research that had been conducted on this very subject, they came across a study by Perry, Skinner, and Abaid in 2019. These were some of their findings. White parents who were more aware and willing to reflect on their anti-Black prejudices engaged in greater color-conscious socialization, including talking to their child about current race-related event in the news or in the daily life and acknowledging the role of racism in such incidents. Conversely, when parents had not reflected on their own anti-Black prejudices, they were more likely to deny the role of racism in understanding race-related events. You don't have to be a person of color in order to educate on the issues of racism. In fact, Charles explained just how the NAACP came to be.
The NOT is an advocacy group, and they advocate for people's civil rights, for their human rights. The NAACP was formed in 1909, and it was formed in Niagara Falls. The formation, there was 60 people there, as history would write. And of those 60 people, there was only 7 of which was Black. At the time, the NAACP was formed because of the lynching that was being taken place in Illinois, Springfield, Illinois. And there was a number of white abolitionists, lawyers, and whatever, got together and thought what that inhumane people of color to be lynched for no reason at all. And that was what became the formation to abolish lynching. The NAACP was not organized based upon race because at that time, as you can do the math, 60 people there, of the 60 there, there were only 7 which was Black.
Racism is a topic that brings some level of discomfort when discussed with others, but it doesn't have to be. When I think back to my days in elementary and middle school, being one of the only few Black students in the classroom was difficult, but there was one thing that always stood out to me. Every time we discussed Black history or slavery, all looks would focus on me. Now let me tell you, that was uncomfortable. But the great news is that through simply educating and having open and honest conversations about racism, things don't have to be uncomfortable anymore. Not for any other Black or Hispanic children in the classroom, not for the mother down the street who chooses to educate her children on what it means to be accepting and loving of all regardless of race. This conversation creates an opportunity to educate and come together, one that allows us to celebrate our differences. Just like the conversation that I had with a lady at Target the other day, who told me how beautiful my children are and how cool it is that I have one of each color. You know what, Target lady? It is pretty cool. It's pretty cool being able to see the bond that they have as brother and sister, the love and laughs that they share each and every day. And I also think it's pretty cool that they get to grow up in a community that is growing and changing each day. I hope that they can be a part of that change.
Trying to sit down and try to figure out a logical plan to move forward. Try to find those things that we agree with rather than be trivialized over things that we disagree with. Nobody's going to agree with everything, but I think we can have a conversation and be openly about the conflict if we're willing to listen and try to understand that every person has got an opinion, and now we have to figure out how do we survive by being together.
The stories heard today are ones that cannot be told from anyone else's perspective, but the one lesson we can all take away from this episode is to listen with open hearts and open minds. When we start to embrace our differences rather than separate them, we can come together as a society who moves forward, one without boundaries in which we can walk hand in hand. As former President Barack Obama said,
"Our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared."
So let's do better. Let's be better. Together, we can do anything. To learn more about how to become involved in your own community, go to naacp.org and connect with someone near you.